Today we put the mizzen shrouds on. It follows exactly the same pattern as for the shrouds on the main mast, except there's a pin rail at the bottom. I think it's part number 188. Yeah, which you have to include in the shroud before you run it around. Other than that, it's exactly the same. Same direction. We're using a square which is clamped to the mizzen mast to help us make sure that when we are lining it up, that we line it up and that it's absolutely square, as you can see right there. So when we pull the shrouds down, it doesn't pull it out of square. So we're gonna tighten up the lanyards now, and the first thing we do is take off all the excess thread, and you should be very careful doing this, that you only cut the thread that you want to cut. And if you had cleared the holes in the dead eyes with a small pin drill, the lanyard rope will go in very easily, as this one does. And there we go. So we just tighten up. Again, we're not adjusting it at this point in time, we're just tying it up. It's all completed. I'm going to leave the pin rail unstuck for a while. I did have a little trouble. It did tend to pull over this side a little bit too much, and the result is this lanyard here is pulled down more than the rest. So as you get to know me on this video, you'll realize that if I made a mistake and I can correct it, I'm going to correct it. So we've cut that shroud off the mizzen, and we're running a new one, which is relatively straightforward. The key is really just cutting it off. Putting the shroud on the second dead eye, the dead eye that's not made up, can always be a bit of a challenge. So the simple solution is to use a tweezers that locks in place. So you just need to get the shroud around the dead eye, which of course is so easy to do. Pull it tight, and then use this to lock it in place. And so now it's locked in place and it won't move. And then you can simply do the half hitch as is shown on the plan. You pull it in place real tight, and then you just put a string and tie it. So we just leave that and let it dry, and then run the lanyards in, and I'll be happy once more. She's all fixed, and now that's one less thing I have to worry about. The mizzen shroud pin rail, it specifically tells you just make sure that you pass the shroud through the pin rail and leave it loose, and then you can fix it at a later point in time. What it doesn't tell you is you have to make sure that the hole that the shrouds pass through are big enough so the pin rail can come down, because it's supposed to sit right here. And of course, having done that, you can't make the hole bigger now, because it can't get down there, because even though it's a loose fit, it's not loose enough to allow two strings to go through. So the solution is to actually take off the whipping where the shroud comes back on itself, gone around the dead eye. And just pray that you don't cut the shroud line, because now I have to actually remove this piece, and I can always add a piece on afterwards. And so we have got it down, and I will add a false piece on the top of it just so it matches back with everything else. We've just completed installing the Futtock stave on the mizzen back shrouds. We've tied clove hitches on the two outer shrouds, and once the glue dries we'll attach clove hitches to the inner shrouds. We're going to put on the Futtock shrouds now. There is an error in the sheet that the brass hook is referred to as a number 210, but 210 in the parts list is a simple brass eye, and this refers to a photo etch part. So we've hooked it on here, and we're simply going to put the center one in, up and over, keeping it tight. And we're doing again a clove hitch, and you'll notice I have a little piece of paper here. That's so that I can see the thread, because everything sort of disappears when you get inside here. So before we pull this tight, you need to make sure that the first piece is as tight as it can go. And now we put a dab of, again I'm using CA because I want this to stick instantly. I don't want to take a chance of it moving. So we put it very tight, put the CA on it. I'm always looking for nippers, pointy nippers that that allow you to cut lines in tight spots. And I went to the drugstore and was able to find some interesting nippers in the ladies' nail section, so I highly recommend that process. And we're going to use these clippers now to take off the excess line. Just a little note that if you see a little slack on the Futtock shrouds, not to worry, because when we use these dead eyes, they'll simply pull up and tension these lines back. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Take the spare line off. Again, you see lots of extra line, and all I'll say to you is that it's just so much easier to work with lots of extra line that we shouldn't try and save line and make this so hard that you simply can't. You have difficulty tying the knots. Last thing to do is just to cut off the excess here. And we're done.